Hey, Paul,
Hey,
look at this.
Look at that.
Remember this?
That's our camp seat.
This is where we sat on the ice.
There you go. There you go.
Let's pretend. Oh,
Move over.
there's
Let's
times.
warm our hands.
You know what? Warm them by the fire.
Yeah. Oh.
There's times in my life when I wish I was back on that ice. Like, I never want to be in a plane incident like that, a forced landing, an emergency like that. That one went really well. But there are times when I think back to the ice, and that was a splendid time. We were only down there 6 or 7 hours, whatever it was.
We were super lucky.
We were so lucky, but I so enjoyed myself.
Yeah.
Like, I can't help it.
It was an adventure.
It was an adventure like no other. With this guy right here, we had such an exciting time down on the ice. The Sartecs were second to none. It was an amazing experience.
The OPP officer was
OPP
amazing.
was amazing. The local rescuers were amazing. And I just loved being in nature like that. And the fact that we lived was helpful as well.
I'm beginning to think, after the amount of time that you have spent trying to get me to go winter camping, that this was actually a plot.
Yeah, I'm still going to take you winter camping again, second time.
But not on the ice.
You might be surprised. Let's see what else is in the book. Hi there, welcome to TomAir. This is a quick little follow-up episode. If you remember back in episode 1 and 2, Paul Briggs and I were flying a Lake Buccaneer aircraft. We were doing a ferry flight across Canada. That plane had the engine stopped working, and we had a forced landing in northern Ontario in the middle of nowhere up north of Espanola. And the Canadian forces had to come in and rescue us back in February. That was pretty exciting. So a whole bunch of people watched the episode. There was a lot of interest. There was a lot of great comments on the channel, so that was great. Thanks for commenting. Everybody seems to be asking the same thing. Why did the airplane stop running? And what happened to it? How did you guys rescue the airplane? How did you get it off the ice? How did you get it out of there? So today, I flew up to Muskoka, which is basically where Paul and I started our trip. Paul's up here today. So we're at Muskoka Airport here at Lake Central, right? This is the exact spot where Paul and I started our journey across Canada when we flew out west. Then we were gonna fly back to here. We never made it back, obviously. Well, till today. So we're gonna talk to Paul Briggs once again, and we're also gonna talk to Evan Hodgson here at Lake Central. Evan's the head of maintenance and manufacturing here at Lake Central. So we're gonna go chat to these guys and see what they can tell us about Foxtrot Papa Bravo in its current state. Looks like they're currently messing around with some sort of birdhouse, but apart from that. All right, so you guys probably remember Paul Briggs from episode number 1 and 2 of the Lake Rescue. Paul's back with us today. Paul was the guy who sold me my Skymaster back in the day. He was my flight instructor, getting me my multi-engine rating, my IFR rating. Paul is also the, what's your title here at Lake Central?
Well, I'm the Director of Aircraft Sales and Flight Operations.
Aircraft Sales and Flight Operations here at Lake Central, and one of their specialties here is lake aircraft, ironically enough. So, strangely enough. And we have Evan Hodgson, who's Director of Maintenance and Manufacturing here at Lake Central. So both of these guys are going to tell us, we don't know everything, but we do know more stuff than we knew when the incident happened, obviously. So let's talk about the incident and what we know at this point. Maybe let's start with you, Paul. Let's just quickly describe what happened, what we saw in the cockpit, and how it ended up in 30 seconds or less.
Well, the interesting thing is that we were working in very cold weather. So I was always watching the oil pressure, because there was a risk that the oil breather could have frozen over. And in fact, we've had a lot of YouTubers respond that they thought that perhaps it had frozen over and pushed the prop seal out, blew the oil out, and the engine subsequently failed. That is not in fact what has happened. We knew when we were on the ice on Alton Lake that there was a lot of oil on the tail. There was a lot of oil dripping from the engine. So that seemed a plausible response at the time. But what we found out since is there's a big hole in the top of the engine. And maybe Evan can talk about what he thinks that might be.
So when we got the call and had the first kind of initial response, we assumed it was probably the breather plugging up, and
everybody said that. Everybody was like, it's the breather, it's the breather.
Going on a whole lot of information, and then we didn't worry too much. Our focus was just to get the airplane back into Muskoka. So we came up with a plan relatively quickly. Got the airplane. We got 3 guys including myself and a contact with a helicopter company, we lucked out that we were able to find a 212 to do the lift so
It's a Bell
quickly.
212 heavy lift helicopter.
Yeah, and we lucked out with the weather that day too. So we drove down, came up with a plan, spent the night, did a good, pre-flight and kind of a good game plan set up in the morning, and we headed out.
How cold was it?
It was cold. We went up.
Sudbury.
we wanted to over-prepare for the situation because we weren't sure. There was a lot of unknowns whether the airplane was stuck in the ice because it had been there for the week, I think.
About a week. Yep.
So we went with picks and full gear, and we were prepared to spend the night if need be. So we got there. We ended up lucking out because the airplane wasn't stuck. In fact, just landing beside the airplane, we could see that thing rocking, and that kind of gave us a good idea how the day was going to go. That particular pilot had never lifted a full intact aircraft and wasn't sure on how it was going to react during the flight back. And we've never seen a lake been slung before, so we weren't sure either.
Yeah.
So we took precautions and put netting on the wings.
So it doesn't spin.
Yeah, we put a bag on
So it doesn't want to fly.
So
Right.
it stalls the wings.
Right, okay, so it doesn't fly. Because
Yeah.
there's so much downdraft from the heli or from the forward.
Just from the forward translation.
I gotcha.
So we bagged the tail. It had a big bag and a rope on the tail to kind of put some drag on it. And then the three of us stayed back while they did the lift, which is, a significant amount of time to fly back at a slow airspeed. So we got a bonfire going and stayed warm, and weren't really sure. We couldn't really make too much contact with the pilot. We did have a sat phone, but
It's not much communication
just
down on that
kinda-
ice, as Paul
No,
and I learned.
everybody wants to know, did you ice fish?
We didn't, no.
You didn't.
No, but we had a big fire going just to stay warm for, I think we were out there for 3 hours or so waiting.
Okay.
And we eventually just started hearing that chop noise of the helicopter from a long distance away, and we're able to realize that they were coming to get us. And
It feels remote on that ice, doesn't it? It feels like
does.
you're a long way away from
It
pretty
is.
much everything.
Because you are.
Because you are.
the helicopter pilot hopped out, and he said it couldn't have gone better. It just flew perfectly.
So you dropped the aircraft where? Back in Sudbury?
Yes, we had made an initial contact with a company out there to gain a hangar space for the night for it.
Okay.
So they had dropped it off, for several days, I guess, until we were able to make a plan to come back. But we wanted to keep this in two separate rescue situations, so we focused on just getting the airplane to the airport, and then the week after we came back and did the dismantling and loading and
Because then it's in a controlled setting. You can get
Yeah.
normal vehicles in. You can get
Yeah.
tools there. You've got a few more options.
Logistically, getting it out there, getting the helicopter out there was enough of a task.
Sure.
Because we weren't really sure how it was going to go, and with the cost of the helicopter per hour, we wanted to just focus on getting it out.
How much is the heli per hour?
I think for the 4-hour rate, it was like $25,000.
Ouch.
There's
I think a tow truck is
$28,000.
expensive for your car.
Yeah.
$28,000.
Yeah.
And where did you pick it up from?
So we had pulled the forward cowl and basically just slung it right off the mount, off the engine mount.
There's a horseshoe-shaped mount.
Yeah, I remember seeing
at the
that
top.
under there.
Along with that, for the prep with the bags and the nets on the wings, we had selected gear down because the gear was up and locked.
Yeah.
So we had,
So you'd be able to put it on its feet in Sudbury.
The initial plan was to go and get the gear down and try to rock the airplane to get it down, but it was so down low in that ice that we weren't able to, so we just made the plan to get the gear partially down and with hydraulic pressure up, and as soon as he lifted it up, the gear went and locked. You could hear it clunk, lock almost.
Nice.
And then, and that was another, form of drag, which we obviously wanted the airplane to be landing back on its wheels at the runway at the airport there.
And also it lowers the center of gravity
Sure.
to have the gear down.
Yeah, so the
Great.
pilot was, beyond happy with how it flew. It just went great. And
Yeah, it sounds like it was flawless. Nice
his
work.
big concerns were enough fuel to get back without having to set it down anywhere to go, because that 212 sucks the fuel back pretty quick. I think
And then
it's-
you guys aren't there to help tie it up again.
Exactly. So his line was long enough where he was able to set it down and then land beside.
Okay.
He has plenty of experience doing the heavy lifting.
Long
like that,
lining.
so.
Yeah, I know if it's anything, I mean, we've done some long lining just with our drones and the stuff that we do, and it's always risky. You get a line out there, and it's the last thing you want is a line flipping around,
So
the rotor
those guys
spinning
are
and
great.
downwash. But yeah, that's what those guys do for a living. Nice work. I mean, we weren't sure if we were going to ever see this plane again, or if we were going to have to go back in the spring, or maybe it was going to have an engine transplant on the ice or on the water in the spring, or if the hull was even integral, if the ice would have thawed, and then maybe it would have sunk. I mean, we didn't know. I was amazed. I went to Sudbury a couple days. I think it might have been the same day you guys dropped the plane in Sudbury.
right.
I was there to pick
you
up
did.
the search and rescue gear that was left on the ice in a different aircraft, and I saw her sitting there next to the FBO, and I went and looked at the hull. There wasn't a mark on the hull. There wasn't a ding, a scratch, a bump, anything.
Yeah.
And we bashed up and down like no one's business. I mean, these things are tough.
Yeah, we've had lake clients who've taken off and landed many times in snow on the hull.
So is there an SOP for snow and ice landings?
No,
Or is that
not really. I mean, you would do it like a glassy water landing. You want a minimum contact speed, both horizontally and vertically, and you can set it down.
Yeah.
So that's one of the great things with these airplanes. If they have a super tough airframe.
Well, I mean, we've said it before, and we'll say it again. I mean, we couldn't have been in a better airplane for crossing Canada in the winter and having an engine failure and having to do a forced landing. We had the options of wheels up or wheels down. We obviously chose wheels up. We could have put them down if we'd needed to, but there was no point.
No point.
We were feeling better about having the wheels up on the ice, and then the fact that you were able to extricate it as efficiently as possible. So now what? What's the game plan?
Well, with any kind of airplane that turns into a project, we typically, find time during the winter months to, do this type of work. During the summer, we just have a lot going on with annual inspections, which are pre-booked, and so our plan is, shortly, now that the busy season's kind of coming to an end, we'll be just putting the wings back on it, getting the engine out, sending it to an overhaul shop for a tear down and inspection. We have a pretty good idea what happened to the engine, but
What do you think happened? What's your professional opinion?
We haven't seen inside the engine yet, but we can see a hole in the rear portion of the case, right above the number 4 cylinder exhaust push rod assembly, and we suspect there to be probably a camshaft lifter failure in that area, which disturbed the case enough to pop a hole in it, and then it would have just lost all of its oil over a short period of time. And it's a pretty rare failure on a Lycoming to have this. But
how big is the hole?
The hole isn't more than a few inches in diameter.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a fairly small hole relative. Like normally when this happens, you're talking massive holes in the
Crack
top of the case
and
so
Can you show us the hole?
yeah, we can take a look at it.
Let's go have a look at the damage.
Let's have a look.
So what would cause an engine to do that, Evan?
It's hard to say without having it dismantled, and a professional who, like John Donaldson, to inspect exactly what went wrong inside. Clearly there was a catastrophic engine failure of some sort, most likely related to the lifter and cam assembly. Normally when you have like a rocker shaft assembly, it's really hard to say what happened, but I suspect probably what started it was maybe internal corrosion, eventually rapidly making a bunch of metal. This would have had oil filter inspections regularly at annual.
It would have had that before we left Calgary for sure.
And I believe it had an oil change right before it left Calgary. So obviously there was no findings on metal at that time. So it could just be fatigue stress that just led to a failure of a component that.
In your mind, I mean, people are saying these airplanes aren't meant to be flown and operated in that kind of cold temperature. Do you think the cold played any part? I know you're just.
It's hard to say again with, these airplanes can be set up for cold weather operations as required with proper insulation and stuff. So it's one of those things where I don't want to speculate much on internal what could have potentially happened internally until we get the engine out and inspect it. Now the funny thing is when we were going to do the recovery, we were just focused on getting it out, so we hadn't even looked at really anything. I had to pull this forward cowl briefly to hook up the sling.
This is where you slung it from?
Yeah, right here.
Right here and here?
Okay. And so this cowl came right off and got put in the airplane. And we hadn't even seen this hole because we just weren't really looking. We were just focused on getting it out. And then when we came back the week after to do the dismantle and load, we started looking around a little closer and realized that there was a hole right there in the rear portion of the case at the top there. So,
do you think when it gets torn down, you'll be able to say definitively what happened?
Yeah. Our overhaul shop will give us a report on it and tell us what happened. It's still worth dismantling because there are several different components on the engine that could be reused if the owner is able to find a case, but unfortunately that case is unserviceable.
Yeah, you're not going to get a crankcase refund on that, are you?
No.
Core charge.
So that's kind of the worst part about it is the owner just
that's a lot of money.
Purchased his new airplane and he's but again this winter when we find a minute we'll be able to get the wings back on it and make it look like an airplane again, and
that'll be good. Well, I'm happy to hear that it's in works to be flown again.
Yeah, exactly.
It should be flown again. It's a great airplane.
Paul made a perfect landing. Yeah. No damage to the airframe whatsoever.
Yeah.
So.
All right. Well, thank you for your time. There you go, folks. We'll probably follow up again maybe when we have a little more idea after the engine's been torn down. But for now, we know a little more, but we don't know everything. So you've got the lowdown from the horse's mouth, so to speak. Thanks so much for your time.
No problem
really,
at all, Tom.
Really appreciate it. Thanks for taking care of the aircraft as well. Yeah, so to be continued. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe the channel.